We've got some pretty heavy board game news today, and by heavy we mean the spiritual successor to Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah.
If you ever thought Hadrian's Wall seems a little light for a roll and write, well then the Anarchy might be the game you're looking for. Now, we're only basing this on mostly speculation. We've seen the box cover, and we've seen an image, which you're going to see very thoroughly over the next few minutes here, because we're going to pour into this image and try to speculate as to what we think this game has got going on, because we called Garphill, and they were very tight-lipped.
Yeah, we're not allowed to know yet. They said it's coming out a ways later, but they did release that one image, and they said anything in that image we're allowed to discuss. So we decided to just go in deep into that image. Now, the first thing is this looks to be the third game in that like historical trilogy he's calling it. It was like Hadrian's Wall, Legacy of You, and now the Anarchy, which is also based on a true story or an actual historical event, which is the Anarchy, which was a civil war in England. And you are playing as English nobles committed to King Stephen. And a big thing that was happening back then was the Civil War, the sieges of the different castles. And we see that like pretty much front and center in the game. There's your own castle you're building, and then what looks to be a siege track where you're sieging your opponent's castles over the course of the game as well. There was no like shared board like that in Hadrian's Wall.
No, there's no shared board. There's a few new components. If you're not familiar with Hadrian's Wall, this is what it looked like in front of every player. There's these two big packs. It looks...
And a little board above your player board.
A little board above your sheets. It looks to be very, very similar, and we didn't say this earlier. It is from the same designer, Bobby Hill. And it looks like it takes a lot of pages, so to speak, out of Hadrian's Wall playbook. But it does look to me heavier, and there does definitely seem to be a few more things going on. And like Ryan said, this whole siege concept looks like it's very evident in some of the components. One of the components I want to talk about for sure, before we dig into the sheets themselves, because a lot of that image we've zoomed in so far that it's so blurry. But we've
tried to pick it all apart.
We are going to try to decipher a few things. We've got our phones here handy with pictures so we can talk about it as we go. But there's a component that's like everyone has this little tiny board. It looks like it's dual layered. That you're going to be building a castle with these blocks.
Or fortifying a castle.
Or fortifying a castle, because the blocks have these different like little plus symbols on them that look like some of the sides have one, some of them two, maybe even more. And it looks like you can fortify maybe your castle or what's representative of your castle as well, which suggests to me, if you're fortifying castles, that maybe there's a little bit more interaction in the game than there was even in Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting considering, like, I thought when, they call this game the Anarchy that you're going to be fighting each other in this civil war, but in reality, the BGG entry says you all play as nobles on the same side.
Yes.
So I don't know what that's going to look like as far as, like, trading and helping each other and bolstering each other, because we did see that track I mentioned where you can see different players on different levels, and each one of those tiles is represented by a different castle. And it looks like as you play the game, each one of those castles has different requirements, and you can move your pawn down the row. Of course, there's little cards tucked. Like that whole thing is a mystery, but it looks very intriguing.
Yeah, it does look like there's maybe more cards in this game. In Hadrian's Wall, everyone had their own little deck of cards, which were effectively... Now, there was one central deck of cards, too.
Like your resource deck or whatever it was called.
Yeah, something that you went to every round. But at the beginning of every round in Hadrian's Wall, everyone took two of their cards. You chose one of them to be a scoring card onto your board. The other one was what gave you some more extra resources in addition to the base ones that everyone was getting. This one doesn't look to be like that, because the cards that we're seeing laying next to some of the player boards, as you can see, don't have the same portion of card that's sticking out below the player or the main player board.
They're very different. It looks like there's like 6 different lines on each one of these, what I assume are the player cards, because they are being discarded right next to the player board. And they're not the player aid because we see the player aid. But then, the cards, it looks like you're slotting like troop cards underneath, and each one of those troop cards looks like it has... And again, it's very hard to see, but it does look like it has victory point conditions, just like in Hadrian's Wall, where it's like, if you do it a little bit, if you do it a little bit more, if you do it the most, you get different point values, and you see those printed on there.
And they seem to have very similar sort of personified character-esque qualities for the cards. It says architect or commander or something like that, similar to like Hadrian's Wall. The other thing going on in the game is both sides of the sheets, just like in Hadrian's Wall. But on the right-hand side, in Hadrian's Wall, I think there's 5 sections.
Yes, 5.
And there's
5 guilds or whatever,
there appears
factions.
to be 4 here, and bear with us. But the top one looks to be governance.
I think governance, and then either warfare or warcraft.
Warfare or warcraft is a good guess on the next one.
It looks like worship.
Worship.
And the picture seems to denote some sort of religion.
We are using our best deduction skills. Might I say, this is not a deduction game, at least not that we know of. But the next one looks to be worship, and then the last one, very clear to us, looks like it's entertainment.
Yeah, it seems to be. And these seem to work exactly like the right side of your Hadrian's Wall sheet did. You've got each faction. Each faction has a box underneath it where you're going to be checking off to gain influence with them, and then building buildings for each one of those factions, because you can see to the right, it still is linked to like how many spaces you've checked off. Some of those can only be accessed after 2 or 5 or 7 or whatever. And just like Hadrian's Wall, these look to be a bunch of different mini games that all resolve in different ways. I'm not even going to begin to speculate on how those mini games play, because looking at that board, I think, oh, that looks fun. But there's no way I'm going to be able to deduce or even speculate on how those games play.
Yeah, and speaking of which, looking at it and thinking it looks fun. Some of you might be looking at this game for the first time, maybe never having played Hadrian's Wall, and you see these things and you're like, no, thank you. But I can tell you,
boxes galore everywhere.
I think it's a fair thing to say with Hadrian's Wall, and I'm sure with the Anarchy, it's going to be a teach. This game is always a bit of a teach. With that said, once you've taught everyone at the table, the game is actually pretty straightforward. It is a just incredibly robust flippin' right in this case, with a lot of fun combos going on. This one looks to have the same mechanism, thank God, because I think it's one of the best things in blank and rights, is to have all of these resources, which in this case is all these different colored workers, at least it is in Hadrian's Wall. And as you're doing all your things, you don't have to keep track of anything, because if you get a combo, it immediately gives you a thing and you go out and reach out and grab it. And that's your reminder that you have that to spend on whatever you might want to spend it on. And it's also a very fun tactile experience of like reaching in and grabbing those resources.
And it looks like the Anarchy has doubled down on that, at least looking at the player areas and seeing all of the resources they have available to spend. I don't know if things are just more expensive, but I'm guessing it is more expensive. You've got to save up resources to do these sieges, to kind of build your castle. We can see on the player board there's this whole like castle influence section, which has multiple steps of how you use your resources. And right next to that, it looks like a huge like resource generation area.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of resource generation in Hadrian's Wall, where you could, once you got to a certain spot, you get like one wood for, you get a stone for every.
Oh, for production?
Yeah, for production. Yeah. But this looks like a expounded upon production section, where you get a ton of different resources, and their player boards, they have a ton of workers, a ton of resources. So it looks like you're doing more with that.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I first saw Hadrian's Wall, I was one of those people who thought, no, thank you. But then when I played it, I loved it. A lot of people look at this and think, oh, are we playing spreadsheets the game?
Right.
But it is really, really fun. It is one of the most fun combo-tastic roll and writes I've ever. In fact, I think of all roll and writes, it's probably been on the highest on some of our top 10
I think
lists.
so, for sure, because it has that medium level gameplay. And, and I'm guessing, even though this does look heavier than Hadrian's Wall, I doubt it's like the next level of heaviness. I'm sure it's probably pretty similar. It's just going to be maybe a little bit more complex in some of the interactions. But yeah, that feeling of like, okay, all you're doing is spending resources to check boxes off, and every time you reach a box with an item, it gives you an item. And so like planning out your long-term strategy can be difficult, but the actual turn-to-turn gameplay of like, I'm just spending resources, getting stuff, and even if you're not doing well, you're just having fun checking boxes and getting stuff and checking more boxes.
I think that's the back cover copy of the box. The Anarchy, checking boxes and getting stuff.
And it does look like it scores very similarly to Hadrian's Wall. We see that score section down at the bottom, where it's looking at like
similarly,
where you're filling in ultimately everything you're doing in the game in Hadrian's Wall fills out like 4 different sections or disciplines, and then those are what you're actually scoring. It looks like we're the same. We've got 4 different disciplines down at the bottom that have little scoring calculation boxes next to them. So I think it's going to kind of feel similarly, at least, to Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah, I hope, for one, that this is just the second in a line of what Bobby Hill does. Well, like, I would love to see them basically take the concept of what he started with Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah.
Do it with a new historical element every time and tweak it enough to where it feels like enough of a new game experience, which this one, from all appearances, does look like it brings a lot. This is definitely not a reskin of Hadrian's Wall.
Well, no, Legacy of You was similar as well. It was very similar to Hadrian's Wall, but a solo game. So they took a lot of what you'd experience in Hadrian's Wall and made it a solo game. I'm not saying that the Anarchy is cooperative because we don't know how cooperative it is at all. But the fact that they even say like, well, you're working together as the nobles that are supporting, King Stephen, like that would be kind of cool if it had more cooperative elements than Hadrian's Wall did.
It could be interesting. Anyway, we're going to be, hopefully, some of the first to get our hands on it and try it. But it is a ways out. I think this is listed on BGG as a 2025 release.
We have to wait that long? I was hoping at least late 2024.
When I talked to the publisher at Garphill, he said, this is a ways out. We're not going to share much more information than that picture. So I hope, Shem, you're happy. We've dug through this picture and tried to come up with as many ideas as we possibly could.
And I hope we're right. I hope you're watching going, I can't believe they figured that one out.
Or he's watching and going, they didn't get anything right. They fell for our tricks. We put governance, but it's not going to be governance.
We hope it's governance. I mean, I would love a very high-def version of that picture, but I doubt we'll get one.
Yeah, we might get some Photoshop working on it. See if we can use some filters to figure out even more. But anyway, let us know what you think. Did you see anything in the picture that we didn't? It's on BGG if you want to download it and look at it thoroughly. I will share it too on our Discord if you want to go over to Discord and take a look there. I would love to have this conversation. This is what board game nerds do. I love poring over what might happen in a game.
And you know what? I'll say this. If anybody can look at that and figure out all of the rules, then I'll give you a free copy.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
I'll even print it out and start playing.
If you can figure out all the rules just from that one image.
We might make up our own rules. We're a little off the rails now. But if you have any of those comments or questions, please make them below. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.